Today we celebrate the anniversary of the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King had many words for a variety of audiences. Did you know that he spoke directly to us as Unitarian Universalists? He spoke to us because he knew that we are a people whose spiritual beliefs are tied to life. We are not a people of spirituality in an hour on Sunday morning. And so he gave us the Ware Lecture at the UUA General Assembly in 1966. He knew that we believe in inherent worth and dignity of all. He knew that we believe in the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. And he knew that we were working for a global community of peace, liberty, and justice for all. Perhaps he knew that we would not get it the first time. And so many with like ideas and dreams have followed him to the UUA General Assembly and given us more food for thought as Ware lecturers. Over these 50-plus years, what has been the message about anti-racism? We have heard one thing across the board. We are to solve the social justice problems of our time. We must do it as a community. Each of us must support the others in the entire diversity of issues. We must follow the others in issues where the expertise is theirs. We must lead in issues where we have expertise, those being other supremacy issues than white supremacy, since we are predominantly white ourselves.
This is an excerpt from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Ware Lecture, 1966. I talk a great deal about the need for a kind of divine discontent, and I always mention that there are certain technical words within every science which become stereotypes and cliches. Modern psychology has a word that has become common. It is the word maladjusted. But I must say to you this evening, my friends, there are some things in our nation and in our world to which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon you to be maladjusted, and all people of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I never intend to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few and leave millions of people perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of prosperity. I must honestly say, however much criticism it brings, that I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and to the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Yes, I must confess that I believe firmly that our world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment. Men and women as maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day cried out in words that echoes across the centuries. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream.
But at the same time, integrity has to do with what is the quality of your courage and your willingness to bear witness radically against the grain, even if you have to sacrifice something precious, including your popularity, in the name of integrity. That's what Du Bois was talking about. And let us be very clear that to be fundamentally committed to integrity makes you countercultural in an age of mendacity. You have to cut so radically against the grain. Intellectual integrity, the quest for unarmed truth, and we know the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. And if you don't allow those who are suffering to raise their voices and play a role in the shaping of all of our destinies, you can be assured that mendacity is operating in a powerful manner. But we try to tell the young folk, this movement is about integrity first. Don't movement as a political movement first and foremost. It was a spiritual and moral movement that put integrity at the center. And that's why it affected our souls and touched our humanity. This is not some calculation of interest groups. This is about what it means to be human. Oh yes. All of us are afraid about our careers, about being unpopular, not being accepted by the mainstream. Some of us will be engaged, have to wrestle with character assassination. There always must be a few who are willing to die based on the love of the people you're willing to fight for, given what you're up against. Now, martyrdom is not normative for the movement. Everybody can't die, but you got to have a slice of folk who are willing to in their truth telling. And when you have that, then with the integrity and the honesty, it's a new day. And what is happening in Ferguson, what is happening in Staten Island, what is happening in Baltimore, what is happening in Charleston is that people who have been afraid for so long, been sleepwalking for so long. And I don't need to remind my UU brothers and sisters, but keep the love at the center of it. Honesty, third query. What does decency do in the face of insult? And these sound like pretty basic notions. Integrity, honesty, decency. I think we need a spiritual and moral awakening and renaissance around integrity, honesty, and decency. Cuts across color, sexual orientation, gender, nation. It's something that people are hungry for, given the fact that we're living in the most commodified, marketized, and commercialized culture in the history of the world. And the market has never been fundamentally about integrity. Somewhere I read, he or she is greatest among you will be your servant, will have quality of service to the weak and the vulnerable, to the least of these, to the orphan and the widow and the motherless and the fatherless. That's the tradition I'm talking about. That's the tradition Du Bois is talking about when he's talking about integrity, honesty, and decency. And the last query, and this is in some ways the most difficult one, because we don't like to talk about it. Du Bois says, how does virtue meet brute force? Because anybody who has the audacity to be fundamentally committed to integrity, honesty, and decency may sooner or later have to come to terms with brute force, with repression, with the FBI, but the CIA, and a variety of different forces that will try to silence you, that will try to make you so afraid, or to make you a sellout, to sell your soul for a mess of pottage because they think that the new wave of young folk might begin to be a serious challenge to the status quo. And that's where the issue of spirituality plays a role. And again, in many ways, I fall back on my own tradition. Death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory? There must be those who are willing to look the brute force in the face. Oscar Lopez Rivera in jail. Mumi Abu-Jamal in jail. Sundiata in jail. Sada Shakur in Cuba. Looked the brute force in the face. Had to come to terms with the killing of Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin. Had to come to terms with the vicious murders of Bobby Hutton in Oakland and Fred Hampton in Chicago. Yes, that is the cost. Oftentimes. So what, in the language of Miles Davis? So what? Is that all you got to offer, powers that be? We have a love so deep. We have a commitment to justice. Since justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. We got a commitment to a cause. Some of us call it the beloved community. Some of us call it radical democracy. Some of us call it the best of America. Some of us call it the best of the world house. Whatever your language is, just make sure you put that integrity, honesty, decency, and virtue at the center of it, and you are spiritually and morally prepared to be able to go hand in hand with the new waves that are trying to transform an America that is so now diseased by increasing wealth inequality, so diseased by vicious legacies of white supremacy and male supremacy. America, do we have what it takes? Always an open question. It could be we're just experiencing the decline of an empire that goes the same way of Rome. Depends on what we do. But one thing that puts a smile on my face that when I come and see my brothers and sisters from UU and feel the authenticity of your spirit. I know you're not saviors or messiahs, but I have a feeling deep inside of me going all the way down to the bowels of my existence that we have got folk in this room who are willing to go down swinging like Ella Fitzgerald and Muhammad Ali.
Dr. King told us not to adjust to how things are, but to continue to be maladjusted to the injustices of our world. We must indeed take a world perspective. We must eradicate racial segregation. Now, if Dr. King were alive today, he may have said eradicate white supremacy. But that was not a term prevalent in his time. We must eradicate the idea of superior and inferior races. And faith communities must move into social action. In 2014, Sister Simone gave the Ware Lecture. Now, Sister Simone is a Catholic nun who's perhaps most known for Nuns on the Bus. And she told us to walk towards trouble. She said, I realized that all of our spiritual leaders, when there are broken hearts or pain in our world, they have walked towards it. They walk towards the pain in order to embrace, touch, and heal. She goes on to say that walking towards trouble is walking towards community. when you have no clue, when you embrace trouble, what are the consequences? And what gets generated is hope. She says that we must stand side by side to look at the problem, and suggests that we talk to strangers around us and ask them what they think about some issue, any issue. Now you've seen what Cornell West told us about integrity, honesty, decency, and virtue. You know, I've heard that in his own words, and let me tell you, it was amazing to sit there in that room. And lastly, I'm going to tell you about Brittany Packnett and her 2018 Ware Lecture, who gave us a look at where we are now and how to move forward past supremacy. She talked about expectations and how to check in about others' expectations of us as comfortable members of a privileged group. Are we allies or accomplices? And you will hear some of that later today. The arc of the moral universe bends toward justice only if each of us are pulling on it in that direction. We are blessed with people in this congregation who work for justice. In fact, that is the reason many of us are here, and what we mention when asked why we are here at UUMeriden. It is why our mission contains the words, advancing justice. There are people in this room who have marched in protest, arm in arm with Reverend Jesse Jackson. There are people in this room who have listened to the words of Reverend Dr. William Barber II of Poor People's Campaign and Moral Monday. And we have followed Bishop John Selders and Lady Pamela Selders into the streets and jails of Connecticut. In Meriden and in Connecticut, we do not have a literal desert to put jugs of water down to save the lives of immigrants. What can you do to carry on the work of advancing justice locally?
Good morning. Good morning. And I have some suggestions, as I always do. Here we sit, having been given a challenge by great black leaders. What are your thoughts about social justice? About how you are and how you should be involved in bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice? Multiple questionnaires through the years indicate that our congregation as a whole is proud of the social justice we engage in. But what does that mean? What is expected of each person besides being proud of the work? Engaging collectively is essential for social justice work to be effective. Individualism here in the Northeast is very rich in wonderful heritage. But what we need to move toward is collective action, and that means actions of individuals need to be brought together for common goals. Over the past year, I've watched 3 immigration cases altered by collective action. One right here at UUCM, the release of Sahitnu from the need of sanctuary in this very building. Another case of Taz Walton, a black queer woman from Hartford, who has been living in the U.S. since she was 4. She was detained in March, locked up in a Massachusetts center to await deportation. If deported, she would have left her daughter and wife here in the States. She was released in December and no longer is listed for deportation, though I just read that the ICE is looking for ways to get her back into deportation status. So be watching for some news on that as it comes up. And the third case, Mario, a junior at a New Haven high school who was detained in October for deportation back to Guatemala, where he fled due to his being subjected to gang violence. He was just released New Year's Eve and granted asylum, finally, here in the U.S. All happy endings, but not without multiple collective actions by many participants. From attending rallies in the Hartford and New Haven, demanding each of these individuals be released, writing letters, calling legislators, sending cards of encouragement, as well as providing for the basic needs of those in sanctuary. Were you involved? Did you even know about all three of these individuals? Are you proud of what we did for Sahitno, providing sanctuary for 599 days? Were you involved in helping his and Dahlia's stay with us be as comfortable and successful as possible? Other issues of social justice that UUCM members have participated in this past year were protests concerning the death of Chulo, a teen who was shot and killed by a Wethersfield policeman. There were many protests, walks, and requests to contact local Wethersfield politicians and their police department to demand an investigation. Another inappropriate police shooting happened in New Haven this past year when an innocent citizen was critically injured by police bullets. There has been no resolution in either of these cases of police or state-sanctioned violence. Were you involved in any way? There's also been a number of climate change rallies in both Hartford and New Haven. Did you attend any of them to show your support for this cause recently taken up by young people? The gubernatorial and state and local elections happened this year too. Did you become acquainted with the state budget issues? Did you attend rallies for a moral state budget? Did you exercise your right to vote? And the issue of homelessness in Meriden was brought to our attention by the Meriden Clergy Association. They held a memorial service for those homeless who died during 2019. Did you attend the memorial service? And what about the annual drive to provide holiday gifts for the men residing in the local shelter? Did you contribute something? And I just want to add John's setting up a group to go out and help count the homeless. This is important for there to continue to be resources and services here in Meriden. If you would like to do that, and this would be a wonderful opportunity, please see John after the service. These questions are not intended to make you feel guilty, only to encourage you to rise up and take part in some action to bend that arc of the moral universe towards justice. We have heard the words of several black leaders today, all explaining many issues of social justice, all asking that we step out in love and with integrity. Our call, as UUs, to integrity and actions of love are put forth in our UU principles, particularly these four. Each and every person is important. All people should be accepted and treated fairly. We should work for a peaceful, fair, and free world. We should care for our planet Earth and every living thing that shares it with us. Do our collective actions show that we are living these principles? There are many issues that our Social Justice Council are endorsing, and there are many small and large ways to become involved. As a member of our Social Justice Council for many years, I recognize that we, the Social Justice Council, need to be providing more information on the issues that we are working on. This we will attempt to do more during this coming year. through the social justice blogs on our website, as well as social media sites and weekly announcements. And as we do, we encourage your involvement, each and every one of you. Everyone can do something. Write a letter, make a phone call to your legislator, purchase items for next year's annual holiday gifts as they begin to go on sale this year. Donna has got a nice large box upstairs and she'll store them until next Christmas. Also seeking more information about what's going on. Vote. Help to register others to vote. Attend gatherings that speak to social justice issues, just to name a few. And you have a perfect opportunity tomorrow morning to be involved by coming to the Maloney High School to attend the Martin Luther King Jr. Albert Owens Scholarship Breakfast. Specific information is in your service bulletin. There's usually about 15. I would love to have about 30 there tomorrow. Tickets are $10. Steve, have we run out?
We've run out.
We've run out, but you can still purchase one for the same price at the door. The full $10 of your ticket goes towards the scholarship for a deserving Meriden student to further their education. A little time and money that can help bend that arc. This year, I urge you to learn and act. What you do matters, and what we all collectively do matters. It's time to step up. You have been challenged. Pick one issue and one way to contribute towards bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Thank you.
Do you know if they want you to show up as an ally or as an accomplice? Because I'm guessing that it's the latter. You see, an ally tends to be self-congratulating. They tend to be a temporary presence that makes a sometimes effort for something they sometimes care about. Sometimes an ally shows up, sometimes they don't. Sometimes an ally listens, sometimes they paternalize. Sometimes an ally takes action, sometimes an ally just talks about taking action. Accomplices, on the other hand, choose the risk even when they don't have to. They're willing to lay their bodies and their reputations and their security on the line because they know that's the only way to properly leverage their privilege. Accomplices stick around. Accomplices are in it for the long haul. And accomplices know that black and brown folks, just like any marginalized group of people, are not lacking or deficient. They are more than enough. They know that black and brown people do not need to be empowered because they are already powerful. Rather, they need you to practice the solidarity that you preach. Do you know what your fellow black and brown UU members expect of you? Do you know if you've met their expectations? Do you know that standing with the oppressed is not to save them, but to save yourself? Do you know what your LGBTQ fellow UUers expect of you? Do you know what your disabled family members expect of you? Have you inquired as to what the women in your life expect from you? Do you know that you need to meet their expectations not because they need your help, but because you aren't free if they ain't? You know, at work, you ask your manager every day, every week, every quarter, exactly what they expect of you. And then you break your back to meet or exceed those very expectations in exchange for a paycheck. Why not ask your community every day, every week, every quarter, exactly what they expect of you and use everything you've got to meet or exceed those very expectations in exchange for justice? This is our work, and I promise you it pays the very best dividends. Perhaps you've asked, perhaps you're striving every day to meet and exceed those expectations for the sake of something bigger than you. Perhaps you're as close to perfect as a human can be. But if you're anything like me, You must ask this question constantly of all you are in relationship with. My privileges and my platform demand that I ask my LGBTQ family, the disabled members of my community, the people of other colors that I love, the young people I hold dear, what do you expect of me? And how do I meet your expectations? I am not being figurative. I am being literal. And no matter how big or public or harmful my misstep or my mistake, if it means I failed to meet my expectations, then it is my job to humble myself and do better. I cannot expect people to give me grace where I have not taken responsibility. Now, I'm not here to blame or shame you. I'm not telling you anything that I don't tell myself. I'm not saying anything that I don't or won't or haven't said in any other room. I am not calling you out. I'm calling you in. I'm calling you in to the divine union of love and power. This single concept that I learned from Kingian principles is the key to how we meet and exceed the expectations that get us ever closer to freedom. I'm not inviting you into a catchy slogan or even a hashtag. I'm not inviting you into the kind of anemic love that is sentimental and useless. That kind of love lacks power. I'm not calling you into the kind of power that is uncaring and abusive. That kind of power lacks love. I am calling you into the divine union of love and power. It is a union that allows love to be powerful enough to take on systems and not just individuals. It gives love the audacity to seek justice swiftly and not merely incrementally. It is a union that allows power to be informed by love and disrupt all that stands in the way of freedom. I am calling you in to family and beloved community with one another. The beauty in this is that we don't have to wait to practice the divine union of love and power until we get out there, because we can be practitioners of love and power right here. It is popular to ask people what they would have done during the civil rights movement, what they would have done during the Holocaust, what change you'd make if you were president for a day. But you don't have to ask yourself what you would have done during times of uncertainty, distress, and injustice. You are living in them. You have always been. You don't need to ask yourself what you would do if you ever had the power. You have the power now, and you've always had it. Your power is not defined by a title. It is not defined by your willingness to live in alignment. It is defined by your willingness to live in alignment with a purpose bigger than yourself. We are called to make the world better, each and every one of us. We bear that responsibility in exchange for our inhabitants on this earth, whether we accept it or not. And your privilege increases your duty, whether you accept it or not. And whether it is with one child or your single family household or with entire congregations, your power is waiting on you to pick it up, inform it with love and expectancy, and work.